Hey guys, in this video we are going to talk about setting auto ISO on your camera. And what that does is it allows your camera to worry strictly about the ISO settings and so that you can focus on aperture and shutter speed. The nice thing about that is that as you move your ISO, instead of moving your shutter speed, you don't risk getting blurry images when you're trying to add more light to your images. The negative to it is sometimes you can get into too high of ISO where you get too much digital noise. The nice thing about newer cameras with auto ISO is that it limits how high the auto ISO can go. It also will limit the shutter speed, meaning it'll drop the shutter speed to a certain point and then won't drop it anymore to add light. Instead, it will raise the ISO. So this is great when you're shooting in aperture priority mode to help you to get a fast enough shutter speed, but if that is dropping too low, to start to raise the ISO. Now, if you don't have auto ISO settings like you see on the camera, on these cameras that I have that I'm going to show you, then you're probably not going to want to use auto ISO because it's not allowing you to put limits that really control what the camera can set with auto ISO. So let's start with the Nikon. So on the Nikon, you'll go into the menus. You will go into the camera or shooting menu. I call it the camera menu because it's a picture of a camera. And then you go to, let me get there, you go to ISO sensitivity settings. Hit OK to go into it. Now the first option you're going to see is called ISO sensitivity. This is the sensitivity that is currently set on your camera. This is also the floor or the lowest that the ISO will ever be able to select. So I would go one step above your lowest. So if you've got 100, I would go to 200. Set that at 200. That's now the lowest the camera can set the ISO to. The next option is ISO sensitivity control, and then it says either off or on. If you hit the right on the multi-selector dial, you'll be able to go into that menu, turn it to on, and hit OK. The next is maximum sensitivity. So this is the highest that you will allow your camera to set the ISO when you're taking images. I would set this one stop below your highest. So if your highest is 6400, I would set this at 4000, and that's what I've done in this camera here. And then the minimum shutter speed. This is where it will let, excuse me, to add more light, it will drop the shutter speed to this point before it begins raising the auto ISO. So I set this one generally somewhere in the range of 1/125th, 1/160th, somewhere in that range. Pick somewhere in that range and you should be good to go. Once you've done that, Nikon is now set with auto ISO. Now let's move over to the Canon camera, and how you'll get into the Canon camera is you'll go into your menus. The third camera menu says ISO speed settings. So go ahead and select that. The top number is the currently set ISO speed. So go ahead and set that down again to one stop above your lowest. So set that at 200 if your lowest is 100. The next is the ISO speed range. So this is the range that you'll see basically if you're setting ISO in the Q menu. So you could change this so you only see settings 200 to 6400, or you could change it to be whatever you want. So that one generally comes set with the highest and the lowest, and we can leave it at that. Now some of you might see ISO range for stills, and what that is that's choosing the range for actual portraits or photographs rather than for video. The next one is the ISO or the auto ISO range. This is going to be for both video and stills if you don't have that still setting. Set your minimum to one stop above your lowest, and then set your maximum to one stop below your maximum. Did I say that right? Set your minimum to one stop above your minimum, and set your maximum to one stop below your maximum, and that will give you the best dynamic range. Hit OK, and then go to your minimum shutter speed. You can leave that at auto, but I would go ahead and put that on 1/125th. And that means at when your shutter speed starts to drop to add light, the lowest it will go is 1/125th, and then it will start to raise the ISO to get enough light for the image. What that does is it protects your images from getting too blurry by continually dropping that ISO. Auto ISO works in both in shutter priority mode, aperture priority mode, as well as in manual mode. So it's interesting to think that you can shoot in manual mode in auto ISO, allowing you only to worry about your aperture and your shutter speed. And what happens is, as you're in manual mode, if you set your aperture and shutter completely wrong, the image is going to be completely crazy. Then what will happen is the sensitivity of the sensor will increase to bring in enough light for that image. So it's a great way to kind of put training wheels onto manual mode so that you can start to learn and shoot in manual mode. There you go. You now know how to set auto ISO on your camera.